Barbara Lee's proposed amendment, one of several in this series of votes, which would decrease Pentagon funding in 2012. This would strike funding for the Overseas Contingency Transfer Fund, about $5 billion. The overall bill, the defense bill proposed for 2012, is $649 billion. That's $8 billion less than requested and already $22 billion less than current spending. It does include $119 billion for Iraq and Afghanistan, and that is $40 billion less than proposed, mainly due to the Iraq drawdown. More amendments ahead, and the last two amendments will be on U.S. operations in Libya. They'll get 5-minute votes.
On this question, the ayes are 114 and the noes are 314. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 41, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 41, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 2-minute vote.
We're in the first of what we expect will be two long series of votes on amendments to the 2012 defense spending bill. This is an amendment by Steve Cohen of Tennessee, an amendment which would strike $200 million from the Afghanistan Infrastructure Fund. Several amendments still to come in this series, and more amendment debate ahead on the House floor, which could go well into this afternoon and into this evening. Meanwhile, in the Senate, they continued debate on a measure, a sense of the Senate measure, that would call for any budget deficit agreement require that those earning over $1 million per year to make a, quote, more meaningful contribution to deficit reduction. The White House meeting today with congressional leaders wrapped up just after noon. President Obama spoke briefly, 5 minutes or so, at the White House press room, the briefing room rather, and said that the negotiators will reconvene on Sunday. So more details on that later in our program schedule.
On this question, the yeas are 210, the nays are 217, and the amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island.
The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 2-minute vote.
Freshman Democrat David Cicilline of Rhode Island has an amendment which strikes all the funding from the Afghanistan Infrastructure Fund, about $475 million. There are 6 more amendment votes ahead. The last 2 will deal with U.S. policy in Libya. Some news about a House seat today from the Associated Press. They're writing that New York Democratic leaders have chosen a state assemblyman from Queens as their candidate to replace Representative Anthony Weiner, who resigned last month. Assemblyman David Weprin will compete for the seat in a special election in New York on September 13th. Republicans in New York are expected to choose a candidate to compete in that special election as well, but no Republican has ever won that seat from that district.
Yeas are 145, the nays are 283, and the amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Mr. Cohen of Tennessee.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 2-minute vote.
Steve Cohen of Tennessee, his amendment would strike $4 billion from the Afghanistan Security Forces Fund. The underlying measure is the 2012 spending bill for the Defense Department, $649 billion. Among the policy issues involved in the spending bill, it increases military pay by 1.6%. It would bar the transfer of Guantanamo detainees. The bill includes $119 billion for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the U.S. military saying today that 2 American soldiers have been killed by a roadside bomb outside the main U.S. base in Baghdad. 2 military officials say the bomb at a checkpoint outside Victory Base Camp used armor-piercing explosives known as EFPs. The bombs are the trademark of an Iranian-backed Shiite militia.
The ayes are 119, the noes are 306, and the amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 2, offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment 2, offered by Mr. Poe of Texas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment by Ted Poe of Texas would strike $1 billion from the Pakistan Counterinsurgency Fund. Pakistan's largest city, Karachi, has been hit by more deadly violence today. Officials say gunmen opened fire in several neighborhoods on a bus today, killing at least 22 people. That brings the death toll to over the past 3 weeks to at least 49. The Associated Press writing it's some of the worst violence Karachi has seen this year.
On this question, the ayes are 140, the nays are 285. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 1 offered by the gentleman from Minnesota, gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. McCollum, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment 1 offered by Ms. McCollum of Minnesota.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 2-minute vote, a 5-minute vote.
Betty McCollum's amendment would make a reduction of $124 million to the from the 150 military bands. This would counter a voice vote yesterday. When the bill came to the House floor, the defense spending bill for 2012, the cut was in there, $120 million or so from the military bands. That cut sponsored by Representative McCollum. Yesterday, in a voice vote, the House restored that $120 million. It was an amendment that was offered by John Carter of Texas. And John Carter saying, quote, "The facts about our bands are that they are an integral part of the patriotism that keeps our soldiers' hearts beating fast." The Texas lawmaker told the Associated Press that yesterday, and he said that the Army has 100 bands, the Navy 14, and the Marine Corps 14, the Air Force with 24 bands, including the Air Force Reserve Command Band at Robins Air Force Base. Representative Carter's amendment, again, was approved yesterday, so the $120 million was restored in the bill, and here's Betty McCollum with her amendment trying to take that $120 million, or in this case $124, out of the bill, and we'll see what happens on the House floor.
Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 226 and the noes are 201, and the amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 2 offered by the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. McCollum, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment 2, offered by Ms. McCollum of Minnesota.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 2-minute vote.
This will be the last 2-minute vote in this series, this one by Betty McCollum of Minnesota. Would limit the amount made available for motorsports advertising and sponsorships by the military to $20 million in fiscal year 2012. 2 more votes will follow. They'll be 5-minute votes, and they both deal with U.S. policy in Libya. That's ahead on the House floor. President Obama today hosted a meeting at the White House on the debt and deficit. The discussion will continue on Sunday. The group met for about an hour or so. The president speaking to reporters shortly after that meeting broke up, and you can see the president's comments online in our video library there at the top of the most recent page. You can also see the Twitter town hall that the president did yesterday as well. All of that in the C-SPAN video library at cspan.org.
This question, the ayes are 165.
Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono votes aye. Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky. Mr. Whitfield votes no. Ms. Berkeley. Ms. Berkeley votes no. Mr. Lobiondo. Off aye, on no for Mr. Lobiondo. Mr. Mack. Off aye, on no for Mr. Mack. Mr. Aiken. Mr. Aiken votes aye. Mr. Gutierrez. Off no on aye for Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Sutton. Off no on aye for Ms. Sutton.
this question, the ayes are 167 and the nays are 260. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 13, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the yeas prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 13, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Cole of Oklahoma.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 5-minute vote.
And the last two votes here, last two amendment votes, both deal with U.S. policy in Libya. You may recall that before the House left for its July 4th recess, they failed to pass two bills dealing with Libya. One, a Democratic bill, which would have provided limited authorization to the president for military operations in Libya. And the second, a Republican bill, which would have ended current funding for most military operations in Libya. Both of those failed to pass in the House. In the Senate, a similar authorization bill has passed through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was brought to the Senate floor, but has not moved forward this week, so that is still pending. These two resolutions deal with the fiscal year 2012. This amendment by Tom Cole would prohibit funds in the bill to be made available from being used to furnish equipment, train, advise, or provide any other support for military activities to any group or individual that's not part of a country's armed forces for the purpose of assisting that group or individual in carrying out military activities against Libya. The next amendment is an amendment by Dennis Kucinich. Both of these get 5-minute votes.
this vote, the yeas are 225, the nays are 201. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amish, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Amash of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
And Tom Cole of Oklahoma sees his amendment pass, which would prohibit funds in the bill from being used to support the Libyan opposition. Here's one by Justin Amash of Michigan and Dennis Kucinich of Ohio. Their amendment would prohibit funds in the 2012 bill from being used for any military operations in Libya. This is the final vote in this series. We expect the House will continue on with more amendment debate to the 2012 spending bill and another round of votes later on this afternoon.
question. The ayes are 199. The nays are 229. Noes. The amendment is not adopted. We will be in order. We are returning to order, regular order. Please remove your conversations from the House floor. Please remove your conversations from the floor. Regular order, please. Do you know who I'm recognizing? For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Ridgell of Virginia.
The gentleman will suspend. The House is not in order. Please remove all your conversations off the House floor. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, each member of this body has the duty to protect the separation of powers that was so wisely woven into our Constitution by our Founding Fathers, and which forms the very foundation of how we govern this great nation. An egregious, ongoing breach of the separation of powers is taking place at this very hour. Mr. Chairman, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The House is not in order. The chair respectfully requests you move your conversations off the House floor. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, an egregious, ongoing breach of the separation of powers is taking place at this very hour. Specifically, the usurpation of a power given only to Congress, that found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Only Congress can declare war. Known initially as Operation Odyssey Dawn and now as Operation Unified Protector, military intervention easily rising to the definition of war is being carried out in Libya. It is being carried out with the bravery, exceptional professionalism, and commitment to victory that define our fellow Americans who serve in our armed forces. And before I address the mission itself, I first applaud their willingness to sacrifice so much for their fellow Americans. Mr. Chairman, a careful review of the President's case for support of his actions in Libya leads me to this sobering and firm conclusion. The President's use of force in Libya is unwise and it is unconstitutional. The level of military resources being employed, both in personnel and equipment, the amount of ordnance delivered and the damage it inflicts, constitute acts of war. At the very minimum, they meet the definition of hostilities under the War Powers Resolution. Yet not one of the 3 criteria delineated in the War Powers Resolution that would justify his action has been met. There's been no declaration of war. There's been no statutory authority issued. There's been no evidence that an attack on American forces was imminent or had occurred. Now, if a Tomahawk missile was launched into any American city, whether Los Angeles, Chicago, or my home city of Virginia Beach, would that not meet our definition of hostilities? Absolutely it would. Now, Mr. Chairman, this is the pivotal issue. The military force being directed toward Libya easily triggers the definition of hostilities. The legal opinion upon which the administration stakes its legitimacy of its actions in Libya is thinner than the paper on which it's written. It is not based on law, but something he refers to as the national interest, a term that the President, in his wisdom, believes he can solely define himself. His Office of Legal Counsel concluded that, I quote, President Obama could rely on his constitutional power to safeguard the national interest by directing the anticipated military operations in Libya, which were limited in their nature, scope, and duration. Listen carefully here, without prior congressional authorization, unquote. Now, disregarding the legal opinions of the Pentagon's General Counsel and the acting head of the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, both of whom told the White House that they believed that the military operations in Libya amounted to hostilities, the President plowed ahead. And, Mr. Chairman, a President's opinion of the War Powers Resolution does not negate its authority. Though required by law, there was no check, there was no balance. You know, even the broadest interpretation of Article 1, Section 8 cannot corral the interpretation held by the President of his unilateral right to engage U.S. forces in combat. Mr. Chairman, it is irreconcilable with our Constitution. The President has taken America into a war in the midst of a financial crisis, and yet another Muslim nation in pursuit of a military objective that is ambiguous and constantly morphing. Though I disagree with the President's actions in Libya, I stand here today not motivated by partisanship. Now, if I woke up tomorrow morning and learned that the President had taken action to defend this great country from imminent danger and attack, I would be the first to stand next to him and affirm his action. Now, if America should go to war, it must be done so in a very careful, deliberative manner, and as a last measure, it must be done so in a way that is fully consistent with our Constitution. That is not the case here. My amendment is necessary because only by using the power of the purse can we end an unwise war and meet our duty, our high duty, to preserve the separation of powers. Now is the time to act, and I respectfully ask that my colleagues join me in supporting this amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
I rise in opposition today to the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
On March 19, 2011, coalition forces launched Operation Odyssey Dawn to enforce UN Security Resolution 1973 to protect the Libyan people from the brutal regime of Muammar al-Gaddafi. Operation Odyssey Dawn ended on March 31, 2011, and transitioned to the NATO-led Operation Unified Protector, which continues today. Operation Odyssey Dawn has ceased operations, therefore part of this amendment is no longer relevant. However, the NATO-led mission to defeat Gaddafi and protect the people of Libya was undertaken in concert with a broad coalition of nations, including the Arab League, and it followed resolutions adopted in the United Nations Security Council authorizing all necessary measures. The amendment would end our involvement unilaterally. I believe this could materially harm our relationship with NATO allies, from whom we will undoubtedly require support in the future and have been our partners with since 1949. We should let the mission with our NATO allies continue so we can defeat Gaddafi and protect the Libyan people. I urge all my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Gentleman yields back.
I yield back.
No further requests. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Gentleman asks for a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from the District of Columbia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 78, printed in the Congressional Record.
Gentlelady from D.C.
Mr. Speaker, more than 25 years ago, Congress charged the Defense Department to
spend.
Amendment offered by Ms. Norton.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Norton of the District of Columbia. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following.
Mr. Speaker, I ask to waive the reading of the bill.
Without objection.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I object.
The clerk will continue to read.
At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. The amount otherwise made available by this Act for operation and maintenance, environmental restoration, formerly used defense sites is hereby reduced and increased by $1 million.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, more than 25 years ago, the Congress charged the Defense Department to identify and then clean up and remediate properties which the Department had owned or leased in order to test chemical munitions. Congress did so because these munitions had left hazardous substances related to the work of the Department. There are more than 2,000 such sites in nearly every state, all the territories, and in the District of Columbia. My concern is with the areas of those sites in congested residential parts of our country where there may be dense populations, and there are formerly used defense sites. A classic case, perhaps, I'm sure not the only one, but perhaps the most important, was the World War I chemical weapons site for the United States of America. It happened to have been right in northwest Washington, D.C., at a portion of what is now American University and its surrounding neighborhood known as Spring Valley. The Army is making good on its duty to clean up these sites, these formerly used defense sites, including the site in the District of Columbia. But we have no information on the health effects of these leftover chemical munitions. They are found in people's back and front yards. They have been found, at least here, in people's gardens. Whole houses, as it turns out, unknowingly were built on this debris, in garages. The site here in the District of Columbia was found by accident by a utility contractor who was digging into a trench. So the neighborhood had no knowledge, city had no knowledge of these leftover munitions. This land was used for, in this case, and again I stress that there are surely other sites around the United States, and I cite this case as an example. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentlelady is correct. The committee will be in order. Please remove all conversations.
This land in the District of Columbia lease was used for research and development and testing of chemical explosives. And it was able to do so in this city because there wasn't any local government, there wasn't any home rule, and I guess since it was run by the federal government, they could make a site, a testing site, a munitions testing site. Hundreds of pounds of chemical agents and explosives were developed and released throughout the environment. We have found, at least in this city and in the Spring Valley sections of the city, arsenine projectiles, mustard gas projectiles, lucite projectiles, other kinds of chemical toxic waste left over from undetonated ordnances. When the World War I was over, they simply used the site where they'd been doing the testing as a dump site. They buried these munitions right where they were testing at the time. Now, that was the way in which you disposed of these munitions at the time. In the area that is a classic case, 1,200 private homes, 30 embassies and foreign properties, Sibley Hospital, Wesley Seminary. Other metropolitan areas have former used defense sites as well. Spring Valley may be the prime target because it is such a well-established neighborhood where chemical agents and munitions were once used. The amendment requires the Secretary to allocate $1 million to study the human health effects of leftover munitions in rested areas, just as the Department of Defense and the Army have acknowledged their obligation to clean up and remove hazardous substances, especially munitions that have been left behind through their own testing. They also have the obligation to investigate whether there are any remaining health effects, and that is all we are asking, that there be a study as to whether there are any remaining health effects from this leftover munitions site from World War I and other sites like it in residential congested areas.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
I move to strike the word and rise in opposition to the amendment, but I'd like to acknowledge the gentlewoman's hard work to clean up this part of her of the District of Columbia. Our bill provides $276.5 million in the environmental restoration account, formerly the Used Defense Site account. The Department has the authority to provide funding to those projects that it deems of the highest priority and that pose the greatest risks to environmental and human health. If the Department believes funding such a study as the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia suggests is important, the Department has the ability to do so. For these reasons, we do oppose the amendment. I'd be happy to yield.
I also appreciate the gentlewoman's amendment, and I will work with you on seeing if we can talk to the military to use environmental restoration funds if your amendment doesn't succeed. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back. Any further? Then the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from D.C. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Person does the gentleman from Florida rise? Sorry. Go to the gentleman. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'd like to ask the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Chairman, to engage in a colloquy on the need for traumatic brain injury funding for post-acute guidelines for our returning troops. Mr. Chairman, is my understanding that medical treatment guidelines for post-acute rehabilitation of moderate and severe TBI does not exist today. Recognizing this, Mr. Platts from Pennsylvania, Ms. Giffords from Arizona included an amendment in the National Defense Authorization for fiscal year 2012. It would require the Department of Defense to implement post-acute treatment guidelines for traumatic brain injury. This provision was supported by the co-chairs of the Brain Injury Task Force, myself, Mr. Platts, bipartisan. It is our hope that the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences be able to begin the project as soon as possible. Over the years, the TBI Task Force has addressed many gaps for our service members. I yield now to Mr. Platts from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. As co-chair of the Traumatic Brain Injury Task Force, I'm honored to join with the gentleman from New Jersey in support of implementing post-acute treatment guidelines. Before 2007, there was no funds in the budget for traumatic brain injury treatments, but with the dedicated efforts of Chairman Young and the other members of the Appropriations Committee, through their efforts, we were not only able to provide funding, but more importantly, to sustain a significant level of funding over the past number of years. As we continue to address new gaps for our service members suffering TBIs, in this 2012 authorization bill that was passed in the committee and moving forward through the process, we requested $1 million to fund these post-acute guidelines that the gentleman from New Jersey has referenced. It's our understanding that while TBI funding in the defense appropriations bills is not separated by purpose, that it's our understanding that the Department uses the overall funding for traumatic brain injury research for authorized purposes. And is our understanding correct, Mr. Chairman?
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be honored to yield.